Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third editions of Race Matter podcast by the Equal Opportunities Commissions. This podcast is aimed to promote racial equality in the workplace. My name is Devi, and I'm your host for today. We are very fortunate to have Janet Ledger, the Chief Executive Officer of Community Business, with us. A little bit about Janet. As the CEO of Community Business, Janet drives the overall strategic directions and sustainability of community business. Janet specializes in strategic leadership, organizational development, and fostering inclusive environment, leading community business in its missions to promote DEI across Asia. She works with teams to open channel of communication, develop talent, and create inclusive environment that drive organizational success. Welcome, Janet. We are very excited to have you with us today and hear the work of community business on DEI. Can we start this conversation with you introducing what community business is?
Absolutely, Debbie. Thank you so much for having me on today to talk about the work that we do. So Community Business is a not-for-profit organisation whose mission is to lead, inspire and support companies to have a positive impact on people and the communities that we all live and work. So we are committed to promoting diversity, equity and inclusion in companies across Asia. So how we do that is that we conduct research, we facilitate a network, we facilitate events, and we lead specific campaigns. And where appropriate, we also provide consulting and training to companies as well. We were founded in 2003, so we've been around for a while in the space. And we're based in Hong Kong with an office in Bangalore that works across the Asia region. We work specifically to further a number of UN Sustainable Development Goals. And the 5 that our work is focused around is Partnership for Goals, which is working directly with leaders to increase their understanding of key issues and motivate them to act on a range of responsible inclusive business practices. SDG 5 and SDG 10, which is gender equality and reducing inequality. So we would work with companies to help develop an intersectional approach to their DE&I strategies and look at issues that are specific to local market and then help facilitate dialogues around that. The other SDG is good health and well-being. Good health and well-being is critical and it's an intersectional part of work-life harmony. So it's embedded in a lot of the work that we do. And then also decent work and economic growth, which is SDG 8. So, we encourage companies to look beyond the boundaries of their organisation and proactively create opportunities for disadvantaged or underrepresented groups to participate more fully in society. So, that's who we are.
Thank you for sharing your work with us, Janet. It's wonderful to hear that you are focusing on different goals under the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Now, with your extensive experience, could you share some DEI practices that can be implemented to promote racial DEI in the workplace, please?
Sure. So I guess I would like to say up front that any efforts around increasing racial equality in the workplace should be aligned and integrated with your overall DE&I plan rather than being something that's necessarily standalone. There may be some standalone interventions that you do, but it's certainly got to be part of your wider view on diversity, equity and inclusion. But some of the considerations that you would want to look at specifically around racial equality, we did research into race and culture in Asia, and that was sort of kicked off not long after the Black Lives Matter, after the George Floyd incident, whereby there are a lot of Western companies with Western DE&I frameworks that they were trying to roll into Asian workplaces. But in Asia, a much more nuanced approach is needed. So that the concept of race itself is not universally understood or accepted in the same way in Asia as it would be in the West. So while Black Lives Matter movement was a catalyst for conversations in terms of change in Western countries, it didn't land in Asia, and hence the research that we did. Some of the things that we found through that research was that if you're talking about race, you need to frame it in a way that resonates with local experiences and avoids a global or Western agenda. So that really means engaging with local stakeholders to understand their perspectives on diversity and inclusion. A factor that's really important in Asia is language being, a critical aspect of DE&I. So, that the dominance of English in many multinational companies, for example, can create barriers for non-native speakers and lead to biases in their performance evaluations and promotions decisions that companies are making. So that should be a consideration. And companies should really ensure that language proficiency doesn't become a proxy for competence. So that's a consideration. Another consideration would be cultural norms around language that can impact relationships in the workplace. So ways company can address this is through cultural sensitivity training and by making sure that they've got the right kind of inclusive environment where employees feel that they're comfortable to ask questions and learn from each other. Then I guess beyond those specific challenges, you've then got to move from just acknowledging the existence of racism to taking some concrete action. So, develop some clear policies, and this is where you guys come in around addressing racial discrimination. That's super important. Providing training on unconscious bias and cultural sensitivity is important. Most people don't know it's unconscious bias because we've all got it. So, just giving people that awareness of that unconscious bias goes an awful long way to perhaps opening some hearts and minds around why, inclusion or why racial inclusion is important. Make sure that you create some opportunities for people from different racial and ethnic backgrounds to connect and learn from each other. And then the last point I'd make there is holding leaders directly accountable for promoting diversity and inclusion within their teams. Not I'd say any one of those things on that list is more important than the other, but if your leaders aren't bought into this, things aren't going to shift, and the culture's not going to be one that might necessarily be the right place to foster the right kind of racial inclusion.
Now, considering the diversity in Hong Kong with people, different type of businesses, where do you see the gap in racial equality?
I think there is a significant gap at the moment where people's aspirations are around diversity and inclusion and the reality on the ground, and that's okay. It's all a journey. In terms of in our research that we've done from an Asian context, one of the things that we touched on a little bit earlier is that concept of race. So, it might be something that it's very prominent in Western discourse, but it doesn't necessarily resonate in Asian countries. So an example would be in a relatively homogenous society like Japan, discussions around race are met with resistance because it's seen as irrelevant. In China, it could evoke sensitivities that relate to historical examples of discrimination against Chinese people rather than focusing on something that's within society. So this is where an awareness of racism as an issue becomes important. So, as in Asia, particularly where there's lots of majority groups, racism is not perceived to be a problem. So therefore it can lead to a lack of urgency in addressing any racial inequality that it might necessarily be playing out. And then also it's more likely to be subtle and apathetic than in comparison to the West. So, it'll manifest in ways around things like microaggressions, unconscious bias that we've touched on, or casual remarks around race, which might be a bit more prevalent and then a lot harder to identify and address. Cultural norms also discourage open discussions on the topic in a lot of, in that it's just, you don't want to cause disharmony within a group or challenge authority within a group. And so there's that, that's something that could be playing out. And then, again, lack of awareness or initiatives around raising visibility is something that we do see. Some of the reasons why that might be happening is there's a DE&I initiative in place, but there aren't the resources provided to the individual or the groups of people who are trying to make the change. So it's okay putting it on paper, but if you don't then back it with the necessary resources, and that's not even necessarily money. I know time is money, but a lot of that's also actually being visible and being seen to be doing the work. Again, leadership. So lack of accountability for leaders. Like it's often seen, oh, that's HR. or that's DE&I, or that's the CSR person's function, and it's not. It's actually the responsibility of the leaders and the broader, in the organisation. And then, so if you haven't got your leaders on board, and I'm sounding like a broken record here, but that's critical to it being whether it works or not. And then also resistance to change in terms of like what workplace culture is the hardest thing to change. It's because it takes time, and you've just got to put the energy into taking the small wins. So that the policy needs to be there, but you've actually got to get in and show some actions, and it needs to be visible to the people that are within the group. In terms of its DNA, if there's, I think in terms of bridging that gap, take the time to understand that race may not be the most effective framework for discussing diversity and inclusion in all contexts. So, engage with local experts to understand how race and ethnicity are perceived in specific locations. And, there's also, your culture needs to be a safe place for people to have conversations. So that'd be a question like, have you created safe spaces for conversations? Do you encourage active listening and empathy? And are there feedback mechanisms where people also feel psychologically safe to provide that feedback? Those sorts of organisations are where they're really starting to build that within their DNA. And then, I think this is the broken record piece in terms of translating it into actions, is you've got to have some kind of measures on your leaders. So, it sort of doesn't, it's always that what gets measured gets done. I know from personal experience, 15, 20 years ago in the workforce, I didn't see much shift where I was in terms of caring about gender until the people above me had some targets on them. How you can support it is engage with local community groups. So community groups will help you understand, and perhaps also, through storytelling and some of the initiatives that they can bring to the table is also really useful for corporates or SMEs that are wanting to do more. And then I guess you've always also got to continually evaluate. So, it's okay, start small, but continue to sort of move through, and reevaluate how you're tracking along the journey. You can use things like your employee engagement, HR statistics around, if you are a company that's got self-identification and people have identified to that level, you can sort of see things like what's your turnover rate like, what's your level of satisfaction. You should try to think about measures around continuous learning. So, yeah.
Thank you for that great and comprehensive answer. So now my next question is, as a small organization and as an NGO, how does community business implement racial DEI within its own organization?
Okay, so there's quite a bit that we do, and you can have a fair bit of control over those processes when you're an organisation of sort of 28 to 30 people. So I'll give you some examples. We are a signatory to the Charter, and that's something that the staff are very much aware of. And we are very vocal about inclusion because that's the business that we're in. That's the work that we do. But how we practice what we preach internally. So if you take our recruitment processes, we partner with other NGOs like the Zubin Foundation and the Amber Foundation to attract and hire ethnic minority talent. So when we bring our interns in, we hire through other NGOs, including Zubin. So we've managed to bring in quite a lot of ethnic minorities to work for us. So we haven't had much trouble having a balance of employees. We also look at, in our hiring practices, at who are our clients and where are our clients and what languages do our clients need. So it's more about the language skill the person's got and not necessarily, if it's native tongue or not. We have cultural days. So all cultural days are in our Outlook calendars. So, we go through and we mark them all up. We do a lot of posts on social media around it anyway, but internally it's visible. And in our group WhatsApp chat, we're always wishing each other happy, what if it's a particular festival, we encourage photos on that. So we want to see family celebrations and all of that sort of thing. So that's something that we do internally. Part of our cultural sharing as well is that in our monthly all hands, we have a cultural sharing. So it's literally, if there's been a big celebration, they do 1 or 2 slides and they come and they'll share what the festival's about, what the history of it is. If we can, we share the food in the room on the day. So that would be every month. Even in our policies, so we give we have days for celebration, and we also have a couple of extra days that people can take so that they're getting, it isn't just time off over Chinese New Year, for example. And this is where we take advantage of the international nature of our team, or the multiracial nature of our team, because we support each other through that. Like one team will pick up the slack if there's a day of significance here in Hong Kong, as an example, as opposed to, and the same for the team who are in India. And we've got people in Thailand and in Singapore as well. So those are some of the practical things that we do that helps us deepen the understanding of racial equality for us as a group.
That is so true. There are a lot of benefits of having diverse team. Now, my last question to you, Janet. What is your message to a leader of an SME who wants to start their DI journey, but it's still determining how to address challenges and still think of ROI?
So, if you're an SME, and I'd come back to your client, like who is your client base? Why is it that or is it a talent attraction and retention? It may well be, you're increasingly seeing supply chain demands on organisations to demonstrate that they've got the right sorts of work practices. We have to fill out those surveys to demonstrate our commitment to diversity and inclusion. So there's questions in a lot of assessments for vendor onboarding now. I don't see that the why is such a bad thing if it's compliance. But get to the bottom of your why, because that will then give you the thoughts about where do you go to next.
That's a great advice. Thank you for sharing your invaluable insight, Janet. You raised many great points here on how organizations, large or small, can implement DEI within their workplace. I'm sure many people will find your insight really valuable. Thank you again for being here, Janet.
Thank you, Debbie. Thanks for having us today.
For our listener, thank you for tuning in to the Race Matter podcast, Conversation with Janet Ledger on Racial DEI in the Workplace, Part 1. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you'd like to be part of the EOC Racial Diversity and Inclusion Charter, please visit our website for more information. We appreciate your support, and until next time, goodbye.